In the quiet hum of digital conversion, old memories are supposed to find new life. But some memories are not meant to be preserved. They are meant to stay buried. For Jenna, a project born from love and nostalgia becomes a terrifying descent into a past her family willfully forgot. She discovers that a home movie is more than just a recording of light and sound. It's a witness. And when the tape itself is scarred, the glitch in the footage doesn't just show decay. It reveals a truth so horrific that it tore a hole in reality itself. A secret screaming to be seen for 20 years. Let's begin the story. Get comfortable and listen closely. The world of Jenna's home office was a museum of magnetic tape. Stacks of VHS cassettes labeled in her mother's looping cursive or her father's blocky print rose from the floor like miniature forgotten skyscrapers. Christmas '98, Beach Trip '01, Mark's first bike. Each one was a time capsule, a fragile vessel holding the laughter, the awkward teenage phases, and the mundane, beautiful moments of a family's life. Jenna, a photo archivist by trade and a sentimentalist by heart, saw it as her sacred duty to shepherd these ghosts into the digital age. The project was a surprise for her parents' 30th wedding anniversary, a gift of preserved history. Her setup was a tangle of old and new, a hefty silver Panasonic VCR, its display glowing a faint green, connected via a nest of RCA cables to a capture card plugged into her sleek, modern computer. For weeks, the process had been a comforting ritual. She'd pop in a tape, hear the satisfying clunk and whir of the mechanism, and watch as the past flickered to life on her monitor. The images were soft, grainy, and beautifully imperfect. The colors occasionally bled, the audio was a flat mono, and tracking lines sometimes danced across the bottom of the screen. It was the aesthetic of memory itself, fuzzy at the edges but warm at the core. She watched herself grow up in fast forward, a gap-toothed kid unwrapping presents, a sullen preteen refusing to smile for the camera, a proud graduate in a cap and gown. She finally reached the one she'd been subconsciously looking forward to, a white cassette with a cheerful sun-yellow label that read, Jenna's 7th birthday, 2005. A genuine smile touched her lips. She remembered that day, or at least she thought she did. The memories were like snapshots, the sticky sweetness of birthday cake on a hot July afternoon, the scent of cut grass and chlorine from a kiddie pool, the thrill of tearing open presents in the backyard. It was a happy day, a perfect, sunny, idyllic childhood day. She slid the cape into the VCR and hit play. The screen flickered from blue to a burst of static, then resolved into a shaky, handheld view of her own backyard. Her dad, Tom, was clearly behind the camera, his cheerful off-screen narration a familiar comfort. All right, birthday girl, give us a wave. A 7-year-old Jenna, all pigtails and a bright pink dress, beamed at the camera, waving with frosting-smeared fingers. The scene was chaotic and joyful. Kids from the neighborhood ran amok, their shrieks of laughter mixing with the classic rock playing on a boombox in the background. Her mother, Carol, moved through the crowd with a pitcher of lemonade, her smile as bright as the sun. Her older brother Mark, then a lanky teenager, was trying to teach a group of younger kids how to do a magic trick. Jenna watched, captivated, as the digitization software did its work, the progress bar inching across the screen. She was lost in the nostalgia, in the simple, uncomplicated happiness of it all. Then it happened. The camera was panning, following a group of kids chasing a runaway balloon. For a fraction of a second, the image tore itself apart. The sunny backyard dissolved into a violent slash of neon green and magenta. The audio, which had been a cacophony of children's laughter, erupted into a deafening, high-pitched scream. It was a sound of pure electronic violence, like a modem screaming in agony. It lasted less than a second before the scene snapped back to normal. The camera now focused on her dad setting a pile of presents on a picnic table. Jenna flinched, her hand flying to her headphones. Jesus, she muttered, her heart pounding from the auditory assault. She rewound the digital file, her finger on the mouse. She found the spot easily. It was just a glitch, the standard bit of tape degradation. She'd seen it 100 times before on other tapes. A crinkle in the magnetic ribbon, a spot worn thin from too many viewings. Common, expected. She made a mental note of the time code, 1432, and let the tape play on, dismissing it as a minor flaw in an otherwise perfect memory. She watched as they brought out the cake, as she blew out the 7 candles, as her friends sang a clumsy, enthusiastic version of Happy Birthday. Everything was exactly as it should be. The sun was shining, everyone was smiling. Jenna let the tape run, her attention half on the screen, half on her email. The party was winding down. Kids were being picked up by their parents, the sugar high was crashing, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn. Her dad's camera work became less focused, capturing random vignettes, her mom cleaning up paper plates, her brother Mark sulking in a corner with his headphones on, a close-up of a half-eaten bowl of chips. The camera panned across the yard, towards the wooden fence that bordered the woods behind their house. Near the fence stood a man she vaguely recognized. "Uncle Rob," her dad said from behind the camera, his voice slightly strained. "Having a good time, Rob?" Uncle Rob. Not a real uncle, but a close family friend from that era. A man whose face was a fixture in their early 2000s photo albums, but who had, for reasons she never quite understood, simply vanished from their lives. He turned, and for a moment, his face filled the frame. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. He gave a lazy thumbs up to the camera. As the camera started to pan away from him, it happened again. Scree! The same violent tear, the same blast of static and warped, bleeding color. It ripped through the idyllic image with the same brutal intensity as before, then vanished just as quickly. The image returned to a shot of Jenna's feet as she ran past the camera. Jenna sat bolt upright. This was different. Once was an anomaly, twice was a coincidence. But it was the same glitch, the same audio shriek, the same visual signature. Her archivist brain kicked into high gear. This wasn't random decay. Random decay looked like snow, like rolling lines, like faded color. This was a specific, repeatable event. It was a scar. Her heart began to beat a little faster. She scanned through the rest of the footage. The tape ended about 15 minutes later with a final shot of the messy post-party backyard. Just before her dad shut off the camera, he swung it one last time in a wide, sweeping arc. As the lens passed the back of the garage, near where Uncle Rob had been standing earlier, the glitch struck a third time, a final convulsive scree before the tape cut to the silent, static blue of an empty signal. 3 times, 3 identical, violent glitches, and 2 of them happened in direct proximity to Uncle Rob. "No way," she whispered to the empty room. Forgetting the anniversary gift for a moment, she was now consumed by a technical mystery. She isolated the first glitch at the 1432 mark. She opened the sliver of corrupted footage in her video editing suite. It was only about 20 frames long. She advanced it 1 frame at a time. Frame 1, normal party scene. Frame 2, the image begins to tear at the top. Frames 3 through 9, a chaotic mess of green and magenta tracking lines, of visual cacophony. Frame 10, something else. For a single, solitary frame, nestled in the very heart of the electronic noise, there was an image. It wasn't the party. It was something dark, distorted, and horrifyingly out of place. It was there and gone in 1/30th of a second, too fast for the conscious mind to register, but just slow enough for the subconscious to scream wrong. She couldn't make it out. It was a jumble of pixels, a Rorschach test of digital terror. Excited, a little spooked, she picked up her phone and called her brother. "Mark, you have to see this. I'm working on the tape from my 7th birthday. Wow, blast from the past. Let me guess, I looked miserable?" Mark's voice was laced with its usual layer of pragmatic cynicism. "Miserable and listening to what was probably terrible nu metal, yes," she joked. "But that's not it. Look, I'm sending you a screen share link. Just look at this." She showed him the glitch, playing it in real time. The shriek blasted through his phone speaker.
"Whoa, nasty. Looks like Dad recorded over an old soap opera or something," he said. "No, that's not it. It happens 3 times, exactly the same way. And look." She showed him the single hidden frame, blown up on her screen. "What do you see there?" Mark was silent for a moment. "I see a blurry mess, Jen. It's a 20-year-old VHS tape that's probably been sitting next to a speaker for a decade. The magnetic particles are toast. You're just seeing faces in the clouds. It's called pareidolia. I'm an archivist, Mark. I know what tape degradation looks like. This is different. It feels intentional." "Intentional? What, did a ghost possess the VCR?" he scoffed. "Look, it's cool you found a weird glitch, but don't go down a rabbit hole. Just digitize the thing and move on. Some memories are fuzzy for a reason." His dismissal stung, but it also solidified her resolve. He was wrong. This wasn't a cloud. It was a locked door, and she had just found the key.
Mark's skepticism was a challenge. Jenna spent the next several hours completely immersed, fueled by coffee and a growing sense of dread. She was a digital archaeologist, and this was her dig site. She exported the single, anomalous frame from the first glitch as a high-resolution image file and opened it in her professional photo editing software. It was like trying to assemble a puzzle with half the pieces missing. The image was warped, as if viewed through a heat haze or reflected off a bent piece of metal. She began to apply filters, sharpening the image, adjusting the contrast, running algorithms designed to de-blur and stabilize. Slowly, painstakingly, an image began to emerge from the digital noise, and when it did, a cold dread washed over her. It was a face, a child's face. But it wasn't her, or any of the friends she remembered from the party. The face was pale, the eyes wide and dark, the mouth open in a silent scream of what could only be described as pure, undiluted terror. The features were distorted, stretched vertically, but the emotion was brutally clear. The face seemed to be reflected in something shiny and convex, like a hubcap or a silver balloon. It was a ghost in the machine, a silent witness trapped in a single frame of corrupted data. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't a glitch. This was a nightmare. Her hands trembling, she turned to the other 2 instances. If the first one held an image, the others had to as well. She repeated the painstaking process, isolating the single core frame from the second glitch, the one that occurred as the camera panned past Uncle Rob. After an hour of enhancement, the result was just as disturbing. It wasn't a face this time, but a fragment of clothing. It was a clear, focused shot of a floral pattern, tiny blue and yellow flowers on a white background. A child's dress. She racked her brain, trying to place it. She remembered her own pink dress, her friend Sarah's green overalls, Emily's striped shirt. No one at her party wore a dress with that pattern. The third glitch, the one from the end of the tape, was the most damning. The hidden frame, once stabilized, showed a man's hand. A large, masculine hand with a thick gold ring on its pinky finger. Uncle Rob's hand. It was holding something small and indistinct, gripping it tightly. But it was his expression in the blurry background that made her stomach clench. He wasn't smiling. His face was grim, his jaw set, his eyes dark and focused on something below the frame. It was not a celebratory expression. It was the look of a man in the middle of something ugly. Seeing the 3 images together, the terrified face, the unfamiliar dress, Uncle Rob's grim expression, triggered something deep within her. It wasn't a memory, but the shadow of one. A vague, suffocating sense of wrongness that had clung to that day, a feeling she'd never had a reason to examine. A dark cloud passing over the sun. That evening at dinner, she tried to probe. "Hey, Mom, Dad, I was digitizing my 7th birthday tape today." Her mom, Carol, smiled. "Oh, that was such a lovely party. All your little friends, so much sunshine." "Yeah," Jenna said, choosing her words carefully. "I was trying to remember everyone who was there. Was there a little girl with a floral dress, white with blue and yellow flowers?" Her parents exchanged a look. It was fleeting, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A flicker of something that wasn't nostalgia.
Oh, honey, that was 20 years ago, her dad, Tom, said with a forced chuckle. I barely remember what I had for breakfast. A floral dress? I have no idea. And Uncle Bob was there, Jenna pushed gently. I'd almost forgotten about him anyway. Whatever happened to him anyway? The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The warmth evaporated. We just grew apart, Carol said, suddenly very busy cutting her chicken into tiny pieces. Move on to the next tape, sweetie, Tom added, his voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful. No sense dwelling on one old party. They were lying, or, if not lying, they were actively, forcefully refusing to remember. The cheerful, idyllic memory of her 7th birthday was a carefully constructed facade, and she had just found the first crack in the wall.
The images were damning, but they were silent. Jenna knew the audio held the other half of the story. That violent electronic scree wasn't just noise, it was a container. She returned to her office, the conversation with her parents replaying in her mind. Their evasion was proof. They were hiding something. She isolated the audio clip from the first glitch. In its raw form, it was unlistenable, a piercing digital shriek that felt like a needle in the ear. She imported it into her audio forensic software, looking at the sound as a waveform. The shriek was a massive, solid block of high-frequency energy. But underneath it, almost completely buried, she saw faint ripples. Another signal, smaller and weaker, was hiding beneath the noise. She began applying filters, surgically removing the specific high frequencies of the shriek. She ran a noise reduction algorithm, then another. She slowed the audio down to 25% of its original speed. The process was like peeling away layers of sonic paint. First, the shriek softened to a hiss, then a low hum, and then, finally, she heard it. Muffled, distorted by the digital trauma and the slowdown, but unmistakably human. A child's voice, high and panicked. It said, "Let go." Jenna ripped her headphones off, a gasp escaping her lips. The room felt suddenly cold, the cheerful stacks of VHS tapes menacing. The voice wasn't hers. It was a little girl, and she was terrified. With a sense of grim purpose, she did the same for the other 2 audio fragments. The second glitch, from when the camera passed Uncle Rob, yielded another sound after the same filtering process. It was a sharp, inhaled cry, a gasp of pain. The third glitch, from the end of the tape, was the one that broke her. After cleaning up the audio, she heard a man's voice. It was low, guttural, and furious. It was Uncle Rob's voice. And, slowed down, the muffled words became terrifyingly clear. "You'll keep quiet." Jenna pushed her chair back from the desk, her body trembling. This was no longer a mystery. It was the documentation of an atrocity. The terrified face, the unfamiliar dress, the cry of pain, and the angry command to be silent. It all pointed to one sickening conclusion. And then another memory surfaced, not from the tape, but from her own mind, unlocked by the sounds. There was another girl at the party, a quiet girl who lived a few houses down. She didn't play with the other kids, just sat on the steps of the deck, watching. What was her name? Why couldn't she remember her name? She remembered her family moved away. Not just moved, they vanished. One week their house was lived in, the next it was empty, a for sale sign hammered into the lawn. It happened not long after the party. She called Mark again. This time there was no excitement in her voice, only ice. "Mark, I need you to listen to something. No jokes, no skepticism, just listen." She played him the cleaned up audio files. First, the girl's plea, "Let go." Then the cry of pain. Then Rob's threat. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. When Mark finally spoke, his cynicism was gone, replaced by a dawning, choking horror. "Oh my God, Jen, oh my God. You hear it, right?" she whispered. "I hear it," he said, his voice strained. "That day, I remember.
I remember Mom and Dad arguing in whispers that whole week. I remember Dad on the phone yelling. I always thought it was about money. His voice cracked. It was the day the fun stopped. That whole summer felt dark after that. And Rob, he was just gone. We never saw him again. The suppressed memory, the collective amnesia, was beginning to crumble. The truth, entombed for 20 years on a magnetic ribbon, was finally breaking free.
The quiet of Jenna's office was now a courtroom. She and Mark were on a video call, their faces pale in the glow of their respective screens. The pieces were all there, scattered fragments of image and sound, and together they assembled them into a narrative far more horrifying than any ghost story. The glitches aren't decay, Jenna said, thinking aloud as she paced the room. They are scars, physical damage to the magnetic tape. Think about it. What could cause that? A strong magnetic field, maybe? Or what if the event itself, the trauma, was so intense it somehow broke the recording? That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, Jen, Mark said, but his voice lacked its usual bite. But what else could it be? Why would it happen at those exact moments? They mapped it out. The camera, held by their dad, was the official narrator of the day, focused on the cake, the presents, the smiling faces. It was documenting the memory everyone was supposed to have. But just off-screen, in the blind spots of the official record, a different story was unfolding. Their theory was sickeningly plausible. During the chaos of the party, Uncle Rob had lured the quiet neighborhood girl away from the group, the girl in the floral dress. He took her somewhere secluded, behind the garage or into the edge of the woods that bordered the property. The first glitch happened as kids ran around, a moment of distraction where no one would notice two people slipping away. The audio, "Let Go," was the beginning of the struggle. The second glitch, where the camera pans past Rob, was the moment of the assault itself, the cry of pain, the image fragment of his grim face. He was in the middle of it right then. The final glitch, at the end of the tape, was the aftermath. His voice, low and angry, "You'll keep quiet." The threat. Dad's camera must have caught it by accident, Mark murmured, the horror dawning on him. The microphone on that old camcorder was sensitive. It could have picked up sounds from across the yard. And maybe the sheer violence of it, the scream, the fear, maybe it overloaded the input and physically scarred the tape. The glitch isn't covering something up. The glitch is the event. The camera didn't see it directly, but it felt it. The magnetic particles on the tape, tasked with holding a memory of a sunny party, were instead branded with a moment of pure terror. Reality had been too strong for the recording medium to handle. And their parents, they had to have known. Jenna and Mark fell silent, the same terrible realization settling over them. The sudden and complete excision of Rob from their lives. The quiet, frantic arguments. The abrupt departure of the neighboring family. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a cover-up, a conspiracy of silence born from fear and shame. Their parents hadn't just forgotten, they had forced themselves to forget. They had taken the one piece of evidence, the VHS tape, and buried it in a box, hoping the memories it held would decay along with the magnetic tape. They had chosen a comfortable lie over an unbearable truth, and in doing so had become complicit in the crime itself. The idyllic home movie was a lie. The whole foundation of their remembered childhood was a lie, built over a secret that was now, frame by frame, sound by sound, coming into the light. The mission was no longer about nostalgia or technical curiosity. It was about justice, a name. They needed a name for the girl in the floral dress. Jenna and Mark transformed into cold case detectives. Mark, using his pragmatic nature for something other than cynicism, started digging through online town records from 2005. Property deeds, tax records, anything that could give them the name of the family who lived 2 doors down. Jenna, meanwhile, took a more analog approach. She drove to the town's local library, her hands gripping the steering wheel. She felt like a ghost haunting her own past. She requested the high school yearbook from 2005, hoping to see a sibling, anything. It was Mark who found it first. He called her while she was hunched over a dusty library table. "I got it," he said, his voice flat. "The Andersons, Michael and Susan Anderson. They sold their house in August of 2005, just 3 weeks after your birthday party." Jenna's breath caught in her throat. "Did they have a daughter?" "Still digging," Mark replied. Jenna hung up and turned to the librarian, an older woman with kind eyes. "I'm doing some family research," she lied, her voice surprisingly steady. "Do you have access to elementary school class lists or archives from 2005? The librarian led her to a back room filled with filing cabinets. After 20 minutes of searching through brittle, yellowed paper, she found it, a class list for the 2nd grade at Northwood Elementary. And there, under the teacher name Mrs. Gable, was the name she was looking for, Lily Anderson. She took a picture of the document with her phone and sent it to Mark. A minute later, he replied with a link. It was a cold case network, a website for missing persons. The page loaded and Jenna felt the air leave her lungs. It was a missing persons report, filed in late August 2005 for Lily Anderson, age 7. Last seen wearing a white dress with blue and yellow flowers. The case eventually went cold. The official theory was that the family, distraught over her disappearance, moved away to escape the memory. But Jenna and Mark now knew the horrifying truth. They didn't move because she was missing. They moved to hide what had happened to her. That night, they watched the entire tape again. It was a different film now. It was a horror movie. Every frame was soaked in dramatic irony. They saw Uncle Rob talking to Lily by the sandbox, his smile predatory. They saw Lily, a small, quiet girl, looking over her shoulder at him with a scared expression. They saw their own parents, distracted by the party, oblivious to the predator in their midst. The entire Sunny Home movie was transformed into a tense, unbearable document of the moments leading up to a crime. The next day, they confronted their parents. They didn't yell. They simply set up a laptop on the dining room table. "We need you to watch something," Jenna said. She played the enhanced frames. Lily's terrified face reflected in an unknown object, the pattern of her dress, Rob's grim, determined hand. Then she played the audio. "Let go," the cry of pain. "You'll keep quiet." Finally, she pulled up the missing persons report for Lily Anderson. Their mother, Carol, let out a sound, a choked, guttural sob that had been held in for 20 years. Tears streamed down her face as she covered her mouth, her body shaking. Their father, Tom, aged a decade in a single moment. His face, usually so cheerful, crumpled into a mask of guilt and pain. "I heard a scream," he confessed, his voice a raw whisper. "I thought it was just kids playing rough, but it felt different. I went to the back of the garage." He looked at his hands, unable to meet their eyes. "I saw him. Rob. He had her. Lily. She was crying. Her dress was torn. Rob saw me. He said she fell, that it was an accident. He threatened me, Jenna. He said if I said anything, he'd hurt our family. That he knew people. The Andersons," Carol sobbed. "They didn't want to go to the police. They were scared, ashamed. They didn't want to put Lily through a trial. They just wanted to leave, to run away from it. And we were cowards. We let them. We took the tape, hid it in the attic, and we made a promise to never speak of it again. We tried to convince ourselves it was for the best." The 20-year-old secret was finally out, lying exposed and ugly in the center of the family. The confession wasn't the end. It was a key. For Jenna, one question still burned. What happened to Lily? The Andersons had moved, but the missing persons report meant they didn't take her with them. Rob's threat, "You'll keep quiet," now sounded less like a command and more like a statement of fact. He hadn't just assaulted her, he had silenced her forever. Haunted by this, Jenna went back to the tape one last time. She was no longer looking at the party, she was looking at the background, the landscape of the crime.
The glitch, she realized, wasn't just a scar. It was a map. It pointed to a location, behind the garage, near the woods. It pointed to a perpetrator, Rob. It had to point to the final answer. She re-examined the footage, her eyes scanning the edges of the frame, looking for anything she might have missed. And then she saw it. Right at the very end of the tape, in the final sweeping pan her dad made before hitting the stop button, there was one more anomaly. It wasn't the violent, screaming glitch from before. It was tiny, almost imperceptible. A flicker. Just 2 frames of corrupted data she had previously dismissed as simple end-of-cape noise. Her heart hammering against her ribs, she isolated the flicker. It was a long, painstaking process. These frames were even more degraded than the others. She worked through the night, running every program, every algorithm she had. She felt like she was trying to read a word written in water. Finally, after hours of work, one of the frames resolved into a semi-coherent image. It was distorted, blurry, and dark, but its meaning was unmistakable. It was a close-up of the ground behind the garage in a patch of overturned dirt near an old oak tree. In the center of the image was a glint of metal. As she sharpened it, she could just make out the shape. It was a small, heart-shaped locket. Rob must have dropped it during the struggle, or perhaps it was what he was holding in the third glitch. Or, worse, he had dropped it while burying. The second frame was even more horrifying. It showed the same patch of dirt, but from a slightly different angle. It looked as if something had been hastily scratched into the soil. It wasn't a word. It was the shape of a hand, a small hand. As if Lily, in her final moments, had reached up from the shallow grave Rob was digging. The image was a confession written in the earth. The glitch wasn't just showing evidence of the assault, it was showing the location of the body. Rob hadn't just dropped a clue. The camera had captured the gravestone he never intended to leave. There was no more discussion. There were no more secrets. The time for family reckoning would come later. Now, there was only one thing to do. Jenna picked up her phone. Her mother, father, and brother stood beside her, a broken family united for the first time by a horrifying shared truth. She dialed 911. "I need to report a crime," Jenna said, her voice shaking but clear. "A murder from 20 years ago." The climax wasn't a supernatural fight or a dramatic confrontation. It was a phone call. It was the quiet, terrifying, and necessary act of breaking a 20-year silence, ready to face the consequences, ready to finally give a voice to the little girl the world had tried to forget. The days that followed were a blur of police tape, flashing lights, and somber-faced detectives. The backyard of Jenna's childhood home, once a stage for sunny birthday parties, became an excavation site. Guided by the restored frame from the VHS tape, investigators focused on the patch of earth behind the garage by the old oak tree. They found the heart-shaped locket first, tarnished but intact. An hour later, they found Lily Anderson. Her death, once a cold case filed under missing, was now officially a homicide. Justice, delayed for 2 decades, began to move with grim speed. Uncle Rob, now a paunchy, gray-haired man in his late 60s living 2 states away, was tracked down. Faced with digital evidence that was as irrefutable as DNA, his voice, his hand, his presence at the scene of the burial, he was arrested. The news broke, a local tragedy resurrected, a monster unmasked. For Jenna's family, the aftermath was a quiet earthquake. The secret was out, and it shattered the foundations of their lives. There was pain, an ocean of it. There was guilt, heavy and suffocating, particularly for Tom and Carol, who had to give statements and live with the knowledge of their long-held cowardice. Their relationships with friends and neighbors were strained, tainted by the unearthed horror. But beneath the pain, there was something else, catharsis. The unspoken tension that had haunted their home for years, the source of every forced smile and every brittle silence, was finally gone. They had to rebuild their family, not on a foundation of cheerful lies, but on the bedrock of a painful, shared truth. It was agonizing, but it was real. Weeks later, Jenna sat in her quiet office. The original VHS tape, Jenna's 7th birthday, was gone, sealed in an evidence bag in a police locker, its job as a silent witness finally done. On her computer monitor was the pristine digital copy she had made. She opened the file in her editing software. She navigated to the 1432 mark. She highlighted the violent, screaming glitch, the scar that held Lily's terror. With a click of her mouse, she deleted it. She did the same for the other two. The audio shrieks, the hidden frames, the entire record of the crime, she excised them from the happy footage. In their place, she inserted a simple, respectful black screen. On it, she typed white sans serif text. In memory of Lily Anderson, 1998 to 2005. She exported the file, renaming it the clean copy. Her nostalgia project was complete, but its purpose had changed. It was no longer about preserving the past as it was, but about correcting it. It was about honoring the victim whose memory had been buried and ensuring that in the official record, she was no longer a glitch in the footage, but a name to be remembered. Jenna closed the laptop. The hum of the VCR was silent. The work was done. Enjoyed the story? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.